Hi, everyone. My name is Lee Madison, and I am an alcoholic. And it is my pleasure to be here today. I'm 32 years sober in July 27th. And there was a time I was so superstitious I would never say I was 32 years sober today, that I would wait until July 27th. But I don't have that superstition, and maybe I'll die between now and then, so I would like to say it at least once or twice. Give myself the little up. I have a man sitting in front of me that I've known for some years. He picked me up some years ago when I came to San Francisco in 1978, and we've been fast friends ever since. He used to always say, well, I'm in my 7th year, and I'd say to him, knock it off. You're 6 years and 1 month sober. You know what I mean? So, how he hung around me, I have no idea. This whole platform here is shaking like mad. I'm surprised I've heard no one all weekend say so. So I just said to Adam, is there a subway under us? He said, no, it's the signer over there. He's working hard, you know, and he's got this whole thing going. So, it's like, oh. And I never think I'm out of New York. When there's a rumble under the earth, I say, oh, it's the subway. And I've been told many times it really is some sort of an earthquake. But at any rate, I was born in 1933, and I was born a girl. And I've been a girl ever since. And I was the only child, I was the first grandchild to my mother's parents, so you know what that meant. And they only liked girls. And then I was like the first grandchild to my father's parents because they didn't like the grandchildren from the other one, the other daughter-in-law. Well, was this special or was it not? And I proceeded to live in this family. I had 2 brothers that were born after me, and I've always considered myself an only child. And I really wasn't drinking when I was 4 years old, 5 years old, or anything like that. But my family drank. There were alcoholics there, and there were heavy drinkers. So I saw the glory and the fun of it all. By the time I came to AA, I came into AA in New York City, and every story I heard, and you heard a lot of stories there because almost every meeting has a 20-minute pitch. And so every story I heard, I had known about since I was a child or had done myself in my own adult life. So there was no news that I got when I came here. There was only one bit of news, and that's that I could stay sober by not drinking 1 day at a time. I vaguely may have heard that, but it would have been very vague, and it would have been something I wouldn't have listened to because I came here with a great deal of contempt. And I just loved contempt. It was a tool that I used all day whenever I was awake. And thank God for blackouts because I can't remember most of the people I gave contempt to. But people around me were like me. I was not really with people that didn't drink. I drank in the 60s, in the 50s, and it was glorious. Everybody was drinking. I knew a few people that didn't drink, but that was rare. And they were, of course, really had something wrong with them by my opinion and the opinions of all the people that I knew. So I had things in order. Life was very simple for me. There was an order. And when I was 9 years old, I had a tremendous terror attack. I was in my bathroom, in my home. My mother was quite sick. And my Tante Vera from California was there living with us on Staten Island to help my mom. And there was a lot of stuff going on. So I had gone into the bathroom with a cigarette. And I was between 9 and 10. And I decided that I would smoke a cigarette. Well, the next thing, my Tante Vera was a Nazi. Banging on the bathroom door, I smell smoke, I smell smoke. I thought, what will I do? If they find out I'm smoking, they'll kill me. I'm not going to live to another year. I will be dead in 10 minutes. So I had, the terror one could get in a circumstance like that. But terror or not, I figured out how to solve it. There were papers on the bathroom floor. So in my genius ability, I picked the papers up, put them in the sink, and put them on fire. Opened the bathroom door and said, "Oh, I was only starting a fire." Oddly enough, they didn't kill me. But oddly enough, it worked in my favor. Because they thought, maybe she has a mental problem. Her mother being so sick, So at many times for the next few years, I was treated very special in spite of these kinds of behaviors. But I liked these kinds of behaviors, and I could always get myself out of a jam in such a manner as starting a fire. I always lied. I really enjoyed lying, and I would recommend it to anyone. It even works in sobriety. It's gotten me out of a lot of jams, let me tell you. And when I came to AA, it was, how did I get here? I came in, so to speak, through the back door. I was in that kind of terror with the fire in the bathroom from time to time all through my life. And I always had the perfect answer to save myself the problem that I would have created. And I did the same for others. If they were in a jam, I created a story for them to get out of. And people were very happy about it often. So that was my life. But I start to drink when I'm 15. And I am in my glory. I'm going out with this guy that my family likes. That's a plus. And when I was a kid, if the family didn't like him, baby, you were dead meat. So anyhow, they liked the guy. He had a car, and he had money in his pocket. And while I was 15, I knew one thing in life. I would always want a guy with me with money in his pocket and a car. So that was the way I was going to travel. I had no idea why, but I had made that decision. Of course, I really hadn't made it alone. My family was kind of like that. So he comes for me, and I don't know what we did, whether we went to a movie, I can't remember. But we ended up at a bar that I had known since the time I was a child. And it was a great bar. It was dark wood, and it had mirrors, and it had the wretched gladiolas. Vases and vases of gladiolas. So he ordered a scotch and water, and I said, I'll have the same. Not really knowing that I could have ordered anything, but I wasn't quite sure what to order. As I had seen my family drinking, they drank Manhattans and scotch and Ryan water or Ryan soda and shots. They weren't into a lot of fancy martinis and things like that. So that was kind of part of my generation to be. So I drank with him, and I could drink quite a bit. It wasn't 1 or 2 drinks. It was maybe 4, 5, 7, 8. We were there for some hours. And my aunt covered for me when I came home, because my uncle would have killed me staying out so late. But she covered the whole thing. And that was my beginning of drinking. I was in high school at the time. I was in a private girls' Catholic school for 12 years. My family thought when I was 5 that this would be the best for me. Goodness knows what I was displaying to them for them to have such thoughts, but they had them. And I was a good student and attentive to my studies. But what happened that night was I thought, it was a Wednesday night, and I thought to myself, wow, I guess I'll go to a baseball game on Sunday. They had baseball games Sunday afternoon. And I never was really interested in baseball like that. I have other interests. So why did I think that way? And I was nervous and anxious in school the next day and Friday and talking to people about this baseball game on Sunday afternoon because I knew they had beer there. So my head was twisted immediately. And I changed. I stayed a good student, but not with the devotion that I had previously. That one evening with this guy who liked me very much, not in a romantic sense, but he liked me because I was a good dancer. So he took me out for a long time, and I liked him because he drank and paid for my drinks and drove me around. And, what else? And I also did like dancing. He was a good dancer. So he satisfied my life in many ways. I don't know how interested I was in romance, but I knew I was jealous in a way because he went out with a girlfriend of mine and took her to the movies and they sat in the back row. That never happened to me. But I don't know that I wanted it. I think I would have been more anxious to get back to that sweet little bar. So my life changed. So I went on and I continued school, and you couldn't drink a lot in those days. I wasn't allowed out a lot. Nobody was that was my age. And I went on to college, and I went to Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, and I'm studying art. I'm going to be an artist. My mother was an artist. My uncle was a famous artist, was, whatever. And so it was kind of in the family, and it was an expected thing. And I went over there, and someone gave me the phone number of some guy that would give me a ride from Staten Island to Brooklyn to school so I wouldn't have to ride the subway. Well, hey, I am impressed with getting this number. So I call this guy up, and he talks to me on the phone, and he realizes that I'm a little short of a dime, you know. I only have 8 cents there. And he tells me what kind of a car he has. And whatever I said to him, he realized, well, he did need a rider. So he told me he would meet me out in front of the art school in Brooklyn. And he wanted to know if I knew where that was. I said, well, of course I do. That's where I take all my classes, you know. And so that's what happened. So I start to ride to school. Now, the guy's name is Bob Madison. Kind of ordinary name. And at any rate, I'm in the car a couple of days, 3 days, a week, whatever it is, and I decide that this guy is for me. What has he got? He's got money and he's got a car. Hey, you think I'm going to let someone else get in here? He likes to drive. He wasn't going to ever make me drive the car. And he was a senior in school, and he was going to have a good profession. He's an engineer. I said, well, I just better start to operate here. So I'm operating, and as it happens, we fall madly in love. So when I announced this to my aunt and uncle who were raising me because my mother had died, and I said to my uncle, and the family all liked him because he came to pick me up and he wore a suit and he did all the things he was supposed to do. So I said, well, I'm going to marry this guy. And my uncle said to me, you'll be riding the subway next month. So that was my family. And anyhow, we did get married, and we stayed married for a lot of years. We had 4 children, and we were in love and kissy-poo and all that wonderful stuff. And you know what else we had? Gin. Gin. He liked martinis. I liked martinis. We liked to kissy-poo after the martinis. We were going to a movie. We stopped for martinis. Sometimes we never got to the movie. So we were cemented. So he gets out of school and he gets a job and the whole thing, and then we start to have children. And when I had children, you had them alone. There was no one to help you. And you had the child somewhere in a room, in a hospital, and then they took you out and they said to you, brush your teeth or something like that. I don't know. And they put you in a bed. And as I sat in the bed, 2 hours after having a child, he arrived with martinis and glasses and cigarettes in the room. And the nurse would say to us, would you like to see the baby? And we'd say later. We have a lifetime to see the child. Don't you know that? Nurses didn't care. They took care of all the infants then anyway. They did everything. The nurse said to me, would you like to change the baby one day? I said, not at all. I have a lifetime for that, thank you. And that was my life. The friends arrived, and they arrived with booze and cigarettes, and we had booze and cigarettes, and maybe potato chips and a few things like that. And the next thing, that was, I guess, 1957. The next thing is that was 1957. Did I say 67, 57? The next thing, it is 1968 or 69. And Bob worked with someone. He worked for Otis Elevator, and he worked with someone there that was in AA, a guy by the name of Al Probert. And I had met him many times previous to this particular night in 1969, we'll say. And I knew that he only went to AA because he had a wife he hated. And this is how he could get away from her. Because I met her. And let me tell you, she was easy to dislike. And I had no pleasant thoughts about this man, Al, who was really cheaping out on his wife. He should have been there helping her raise the children. He was a cute little guy, a little small, dapper guy, and he just loved Bob so much. So anyhow, it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was very drunk sitting on my couch, and I said, I knew something was wrong with Bob. Now, you've heard about my drinking? I knew Bob was too drunk. And I knew he wasn't going to be able to last much longer. So I called Al. Al answers his phone at 2 in the morning. And I said to him my story. I said to him, you know, Bob has to go somewhere, and I guess it's AA, and I'm calling you. Well, he knew. He didn't say to me, how about you, sister? He said, fine, and he sort of said, I've been waiting for the call. Now, so he told me just what to do. So the next morning, I think it was Christmas of 68. That's what it must have been. The next morning, the kids were away visiting the grandparents, etc. I wake Bob up, and I say to him, we're going somewhere. And he was very pleased to go. I said, we'll meet Al, and he told us a place to go in Long Island. So we went out there to Long Island, and Al took over, and they put Bob in a 5-day drying out. And Bob was very happy to be there, and he brought stuff that he might need. I don't know, a tennis racket, you know, all that silliness one thinks. But he really was appreciating going somewhere for a rest. He knew he was tired out. He didn't know from what. I didn't either. I just suspected it was alcohol. And that was to be our beginning in AA. Bob got put in. I said to Al, oh, God, I need a drink. So he takes me across the street and buys me a couple of drinks. So I get in the car. He says to me, it was a Saturday, he said to me, I said, what should I do, Al? What should I do? And he tells me that I could go to Al-Anon. Or he says, why don't you go to an AA meeting? There's an AA meeting not far from your house tonight, Saturday night, in Manhattan, and it's called Madison 73. I said, oh. He said, can you remember that? I said, sure, I can remember that. Of course I can. So I went back to the city, and I went to visit a friend of mine who owned a card shop, and the two of us sat and tied a heat on because of Bob being in the hospital. We were both very upset and crying about Bob being in the hospital. And somehow someone knew that once you went to AA, you don't drink. So that was a very upsetting thing to a lot of people, to hear that someone that was able to drink can no longer drink. So I then somehow or other put myself together and got over to Madison 73. So some dame meets me at the door. Her name is Yvette Schumer. I'll never forget her in my life. Rudest woman you could ever want to meet. And she says to me, she shakes my hand and says, welcome. I said, I'm not here for myself, you know. Stinking of booze. My eyes, I don't like my eyes today. I loved them then. They were like B-59s. Because along with gin, I drank everything else that was possible to drink, and I loved Dexedrine. So that was my life. So these eyes are coming out like this, and I'm like shake, rattle, and roll. And she's saying, come with me, darling. And I'm thinking, darling, you. So she brings me and sits me up front for an early meeting, a 7:30 meeting, a beginner's meeting before a regular 8:30 hour-and-a-half meeting. Is this a torture I'm in for? Is this a torture? Al didn't tell me that part. So anyhow, I hung around and I stayed there. She introduced me to some people, and I said to every one of them, it's not for me, you know. And I bought a big book, and I bought a 12 by 12. You bought your books in those years in New York. Nobody gave you anything. It was all pay your own way. And I didn't like that because at the bar, someone always paid for me. So how come I'm here and no one buys me a book? But I put up with it. I was good at putting up with things. And I'm very bewildered. My mind keeps floating somewhere else. So then it's 10 o'clock, and they grab me. I wanted to go home. I mean, what am I? Staying out at 10 o'clock, after 10 o'clock at night with my husband sick in the hospital? I mean, I had propriety. I had morality. I had all of these things. You know, the hangover state. I hadn't had a drink for 3 hours. So they grab me, and they bring me to a place called Stark's, and all these AAs come in. It's 10 after 10 at night because they talk after the meeting, yada-ty, 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 yada. Oh, God, you couldn't understand a word they said. I thought I was in a foreign place. And they're ignoring me, but they're holding on to me. No one's listening to me. No one says, how am I? I noticed the rudeness. So anyhow, they take me up to Stark's, and we go into this place, and there are a bunch of round tables all over, and all these people from AA are milling in from all over the damn place. Oh, it was dreadful looking. I was just so embarrassed for all of them. Because what they were doing is they were eating ice cream sundaes and drinking sodas. And I was truly, truly surprised because I didn't know at 10 o'clock at night in Manhattan you could buy an ice cream soda. I was impressed with what I didn't know. So I picked him up on Friday or Saturday out at the hospital. And I had found, well, the 5 days he was gone, a sponsor or two for him. The best meetings in town. I underlined in the big book all the parts about what you do to your wife. I was slick. And I had it all organized for him. So we started our AA adventure. And we became known all over. I have no idea what names were put to us. But we were battling and loving and leaving each other, and it was always hysterical. It was a year and a half later. I went to meetings, but I would never go with too many drinks because I was not an alcoholic. But I would only have 2 drinks because I didn't want to insult you good people. And I knew all of you. I invited you all home to my home. I had dinner parties all the time. My kids called you all the ginger ale drinkers. So it was like a whole known thing, but I was not an alcoholic. I was not in AA, and I'm drinking every day from here to there, as I normally did. And it was, I guess, a year and a half later. And I woke up one morning, and I had a dreadful hangover. And we had a business, and we both went to work in the business and stuff like that. I went to a bar at 11 o'clock, and I really didn't go to bars at 11 o'clock by myself. And I had some Valium. And I took Valium, and I learned that in AA. They always talked about the pills they took to be able to stay sober enough to work, and then what they took at another time so that at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock they could really drink, and then take the sleeping pill, the wake-up pill when they went to bed at night so that they could get some sleep. So they had this all figured out. So I sat at the bar, and I'm taking the Valium, and I ordered a drink, and I said, Lee, it's all over. You can't do this. I knew that I was gaining another way of life I couldn't face. So that night I went to a meeting I never went to before in my life in New York, and I had never gone back to since. And the thing you were told in those years was to walk up to the secretary, tell the secretary you were a member of AA, you were an alcoholic. So I walked up to the secretary. She didn't know who I was. I was known in a lot of other meetings, and because I'm so erudite and charming. I told her I was an alcoholic, and she said, yes, dearie. Like she couldn't tell by looking at me. So then the next day I took Bob's AA book, and he had a lot of names and numbers in them, and I knew them all because I called these people frequently to tell them he was drinking. He was not staying sober. So I notified every one of you immediately. I knew he was drinking. You were called from A to B to C. A, B, C, so forth, all the way down. And they never said to me, we knew it. We've been waiting for you, babe. I said, really? 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 So I went the next Thursday or Monday, whichever it was, and I joined a group called Lenox Hill. And I got a woman for my sponsor that I had been talking to regularly. Her name was Wendy, and her husband was also in AA. I got a lot of information going to meetings in a half-stupid state. And they had said that get a sponsor that is close to your life. If you're married, get someone with a husband. If you have children, get someone with a husband and children, and so forth. So I got her. I liked her. She was 12 years sober, and it was a great, great time we had together forever. She was very curt to me. She would not listen to my problems. She would always say to me, when I called her, no matter what my problem was, she said, did you take a drink today? I'd say no. She'd say, did you take a drug? I'd say no. She said, well, then you have no problem. Go about your day. Wow, I didn't like that because I had girlfriends that had sponsors that took them to lunch. That talked spiritual matters with them. Science of mind, things like that were very popular then. She's not talking like that to me. But I am impelled to call her back all the time. She also had a strange memory. I had called her one time. I was about 6 months sober, and I said to her, oh, I'm going down to Puerto Rico or Cuba or somewhere I was making arrangements to go to. And she says to me, oh, she said, are you? I said, yes, I'm just making arrangements and I'm going to go. She says, I thought, I heard you say last month you had no money to pay your rent. Oh, I said to myself. That was it. I changed my plans. She remembered everything I said, and it was fed back to me when I came up with my genuine, sincere, modestly flamboyant way of life. She said to me, I would call her, and I would say to her, oh, I'd be nervous, and I'd be this, and I'd be that. She'd say, did you go to a meeting last night? I'd say yes. She said, did you go the night before? I'd say yes. She'd say, did you go the night before? I'd say yes. She said, you're overdosed. Go to the movies. She didn't believe in daily meetings. There weren't really daily meetings in New York. There was a meeting you could go to every day at night. There were no daytime meetings in those years. There were no morning meetings. New Yorkers could hardly get up and get themselves dressed and get onto that subway. No, let's go to a morning meeting. So I suppose there are today. But at that time, it was just evening meetings and join a group. Now, my sobriety and the rest of my life, and I'll tell you about the other people in my life, because it is very significant what AA is. AA is not a word. It is not Alcoholics Anonymous. It is you people in this room, in every room across the world. And I was made sober by my group. My group in New York was Lenox Hill. I was transferred to Boston. My group in Boston was Belmont. Then I got sent to San Francisco. They didn't know what they got when they got me. And my group there was Gratitude Group. What was the name of it? Wednesday, Huntington Square. Thank you, Bruce. I can't remember a thing. That's important. I can remember all non-important, non-essential things. I can remember what I like, what I want, and what I want to buy. So, I got sober at these groups and kept sober. My present group is the Redwood Valley group. It meets twice a week. And I went to these groups all the time. I went when I was sick, when I was well. I was never too sick. You know, I wasn't like sick and had to be in a hospital. But sometimes I was very sick and had to be in a hospital, but no one was recognizing go unless I was really up against the fan, you know what I mean? And I continued my own ideas, i.e. terror, because I was going to be caught smoking. Those ideas have stayed with me from today until today. So my interpretation of life might not be mainstream, but I don't drink today. I take no pills from doctors. I take no medication from anyone on the street. I take no medication from anyone I might meet that might want to share it. There is that possibility too. Because when I drank in the 60s and the 50s, the women carried a lot of stuff in their bags. There was a lot of Librium going around. And you could get that with a drink at any bar because someone would open their bag and say, "Oh, you're nervous, honey? Here, have one of these." "Oh, yes, I'll have one." And then this one, I always ordered a martini. And then this one over here would order, I don't know, an old-fashioned. I'd say, "I'll have one of those." And then this guy would order a whiskey sour. I'd say, "I'll have one of those." Because I was never one to refuse. I always appreciated the fact that the world has a lot in it and I ought to partake of it like others. So I partook plenty. But I came here and I started to stay sober. Bob did not stay sober. He was to drink for the next 7 years or so, which irritated me no end. I wanted to murder him at a meeting often, and people dragged him in one direction and dragged me in another direction. I had a temper when I drank, and I still have a temper. My temper, God has not seen that my temper is interfering with my sobriety. Therefore, it has not been removed. And therefore, the people around me have to suffer the results of it. I don't always like the after effects or the hangover of a temper tantrum. But I love the temper. It's powerful. I can say and do things that I'm so crazy about. So I use that whenever necessary. And it doesn't stand in the way of my sobriety. Because you people out there keep me sober. And my temper doesn't bother you. And you know what I will do. So my sponsor also told me that I was to, what was I to do? Oh, if AA asked, I was to say yes. So, when AA asked, I was to say yes. While I was in New York for the first year, they didn't ask me much to do. The group that I belonged to, Lennox, had coffee pourers. I was asked once to pour coffee, never again because I didn't do it the right way. And I could have been miffed at that, but I really wasn't, because I didn't like the servant part of AA. I got up to Boston, and my group they didn't dislike me, but I troubled them with my New York accent, with my New York ideas. And so they knew there was a thing called general service. And they knew that you could appoint someone a GSR. So they appointed me the GSR, and as my sponsor had said to me, I accepted. So off I went to a general service meeting. I found them very rude. They didn't hardly say anything to me. Here I was there, and as a group appointee, they should have recognized me. They talked about things I knew nothing about. I found that troublesome. And they didn't talk about themselves. I was astounded. It was no I talk. I said, wow. But my group was very disappointed because, lo and behold, I kept coming to meetings. My group thought knew that you could not expel anyone from AA, but they thought if they sent me to general service, I wouldn't come back to meetings. So I came back to meetings as a hound dog, because it was the years we were getting non-AA literature out of the group. Well, baby, I was in there, and I always had my girl gang, and we were throwing away this literature like mad, and the others were picking it up and putting it back. It was quite a scene for some time. Somewhere in I have 4 children, 3 girls and a boy. They are either stoned or drunk, 3 of them. Take your choice, but they are. I am sober. Bob is drinking periodically. Sean, who is 9 or 10, is not using or drinking. I didn't think. I have no idea. But I just thought she was too young. Although she was smoking cigarettes, I was to find out. So, at any rate, I decided to run my family life like AA and have business meetings like they do in general service and use the 12 traditions to run the family. So I was very, very hip on all this. And it turned out that when we had our votes, they all voted me down. It turned out we had 2 refrigerators, one in the kitchen and one downstairs in the basement. I went into the basement refrigerator one day. I found beer. I brought this up at a family general service type meeting. And you know what they decided? It was my beer. I was 4 years sober. Well, I was outraged again. And I gave that up. I said, it's not working here. It might work in AA, but it is not working in my home. I don't know when my kids came into AA, but it was somewhere. Liz must be sober about 22 years. I don't know how old she is either. And I don't remember when she was born. I think they came into AA in San Francisco. So my first daughter, Meg, came into AA. And she hung around for maybe a year and a half or so. But she's not a taker, so she drinks today. And she lives in Hollywood and knows all the members of AA, you know, and she quotes all the stars' names when I see her. But she can still drink, she said. I don't know. But I'm not part of that life. And Liz is sober 22 years, as I said. And then I have a daughter, Sean. And Sean must be sober 15 or 16 years. She got married, and they took a video of her wedding. And when she saw the video, it occurred to her she was drunk. She was drunk. And she got sober, I think, shortly thereafter. She didn't tell me she was coming to AA to get sober, but someone else in the family did. And they told me that what she was doing, she broke into Meg's house and crawled through a window to live at Meg's house. And I said to myself, I wonder what this means. But knowing my children well enough, I was not going to ask what that meant. What that meant was she left her husband of maybe a year or a year and a half and went over to live with her sister so she could go to AA and get sober. Why she had to break a window and crawl inside, I don't know. But you don't ask questions if you're a mother. You just say, isn't that lovely, clever? Oh, marvelous. But anyhow, Sean did stay sober. And she's still with the same husband. And I had a son. And he was a problem to everyone. He was quite darling, and people that knew him loved him, but he was a very big problem. He had been in and out of drugs and alcohol since he was maybe 13 or 14. He had been arrested by the police for doing such exotic crimes as stealing fire hats out of a firehouse. Now, I was sober in AA, and this did not please me at all. And that was in Boston, and I just was livid to think that this kid was acting this way. He was supposed to be in school. We're paying for private education. I mean, I didn't like that. That money could have gone to me. So, at any rate, something happens. We come to California. He goes into the Navy, and I was surprised the Navy kept him. So the last I heard from him was that he was going to be going to the Mediterranean or something like that. But all of a sudden, a week later, he's home. I said, uh-oh. He came home because the Navy threw him out. I said, gee whiz. I was very disappointed. But anyhow, my two daughters came from New York here, and we rented a big apartment, and I gave each of my kids a year to live with me in San Francisco to establish themselves and get out and get their own places. I made them all pay rent. They didn't like that, so that did encourage them to get out because they would rather pay more rent somewhere else than pay anything to me. So that worked well. I said to W when he came home, I said, W, well, you can live here one day at a time. At the end of the day, I will review your situation. And if it meets my approval, you will stay here for another day. So our W decided to go to AA. And he became sober. He said to me one time during this period, how come I am reviewed every day and no one else is? I said, because you are you. And you need a daily review. But he stayed sober and he got a job, and we were very, very pleased. I cannot tell you, his father and I were so relieved. I was so relieved because the 12 years or so before with him, they frightened me dreadfully. And everyone in AA got to know him, and he was outspoken, and he was fun. And I see my friends are here in the front. They're all laughing because they knew him. In 1991, or was it 92, we got a phone call at my house. We were moving up to Ukiah at the time from San Francisco. And my daughter, Shawn, called, and she told her father. It was out with Laura Faye. And my girlfriend Marie and my cousin Patty. And we're coming in the house from the store, and I knew something terrible had happened. Bob was at the door. And Bob said to me, come inside, I have something to tell you. He never could say it out, and it irritated me. I said, why can't he talk? Why do I have to go inside? He takes me inside to tell me that R.W. was dead. Wow, what a rock. He committed suicide. Wow, wow, wow. So we packed up and we went into the city and made the arrangements. And I didn't know how I would speak. I didn't know what I would say. I didn't know what I would do. But Marion and Jerry called up, and they came in and arranged a party at my house for after whatever service we decided to have would be over. Word spread like wildfire through San Francisco, but I knew I had to say something. So it was a Monday night, and Bob and I went to a meeting down at Dry Dock. And I was in such turmoil, like, what would I say? How am I going to say this? I knew I had to say something. Well, when I came to AA, my sponsor and others had said, you never have to worry once you're sober in AA. Something will happen to dispel whatever problem it is you have at the time. God will speak for you, something like that. So I walked into the room knowing I had a certain job to do. Frank Brennan was there. The meeting was just starting. Frank Brennan stands up and stops the meeting, and he said, I want you all to know that this is Lee and Bob Madison. Their son had died Sunday. Wow. I said, it's just like they told me back in 1970 when I got sober. It would be done for me. So Alcoholics Anonymous is only a sterile word. The group, the assembled people here keep me sober. And the God of AA is not the God of any church. It is not the God of any religion in the world, be it the most wonderful religion or not. Who knows? It is the God that only works in an AA meeting. And fortunately, I and each one of you can take a piece of that God out with you. And the next time you go to a meeting, it becomes a whole again. And then we all leave with a piece, and it becomes a whole again. I have known people that were great God believers and great spirituality believers. And you know, they left AA for a church, for a sect, for Buddha, for a Swami. They're all drunk. They didn't understand. It's the God of AA. It's the God that we all have. And when this room, this afternoon at 4 o'clock, is vacated, there's no God in this room. We have taken that God with us. And that God can work for me between meetings. I don't go for a month without a meeting. I don't think I've ever been a week without a meeting. But I am at my 2 meetings a week. And during times in my life, I've had tremendous turmoil. I have problems with my own ego, which I know surprises you to hear me say that. Because I know you're looking at me as some simple, wonderful woman that set the tone for sobriety in her own home. That has a family that loves her and adores her. And they do, but it's not in any fashion that's in a book or on a Hallmark card. Nor is it to my liking or my way. I've had a lot of problems in AA. I have hated total groups in AA. I have hated my own home group in AA. When I was in New York with my girl gang, we hated Lenox Hill, our group. So what we did to punish them is, for a couple of weeks, we went to the West Side to meetings. No one called. We went back to Lenox Hill. No one said, were you on vacation? They were relieved. When I didn't call my sponsor, she was happy. She didn't want to hear it. No way. And I got no lovely soft stuff. I had a woman in Boston help me because I didn't need any help, but I was willing to help you people. Her name was May. And so I was always complaining once I got to Boston. I want to go to New York. I don't want to be here. I want to go to New York. I went to New York every other week anyway. I was working in a studio down in New York, so I went back to New York every other week to work in the studio, to see my friends, yada yada. And then, so the people in Boston didn't know I got there yet. The people in New York didn't even know I left. When it's every other week, you know. But I'm whining. So May says to me, you really want to go to New York? I said, yeah, I do. She says, you really want? So she asked me that dumb question 4 or 5 times, and I gave her the same beautiful yes answer. She said, fine, pack your bag. I'm coming over with my car, and I'm going to drive you down right now. I was never told to work a step to solve a problem. I was never told that I was unreasonable. I was always given a solution, and I hated the solution. I had to back down so fast. I was so embarrassed. She embarrassed me. I was so annoyed. I was so miffed. I could never again call anyone or tell them I wanted to go to New York. She solved the problem. So my problems have been solved through you people. Through the way you people work the steps, you feed it at me. So be sure you're going to people in AA that have a respectable sobriety, that know somewhat about the steps and the traditions. Otherwise, you cannot get any accurate help. It's impossible. So I've always gone to the people sober longer than me, and they can be hateful. I warn you. But I have never forgotten what they said. I called up another dame in Boston one time, and I was just having such a wonderful time. And I told her, I was crying and I was upset. And I had good reason to be upset with my children and my husband and all the problems that I had in my life. And she listened to me. And I said, yes, I'm going to commit suicide. She said to me, that's a lot of self-pity. Wow. That stopped me immediately from even thinking like that again. Because if there was anything I hated, I had a hate list in my life. One thing was self-pity. The second was people that never took a drink. And it was of that sort. The third was people that paid their bills on time. What a naive idea. So I came to AA with established principles and ideas, all of which have had to be altered since I got here. Even my temper had to be altered. Nothing's been taken away. I was not told to change or take anything away. I was 12 years sober in a terrible, terrible spot, terribly upset. Bob and I were not getting along. It was really bad. My sponsor was up in Sacramento, so she said, come up here. So we went up there, and I'm sitting down here, and it's a damn hot day, and we're out at the fair. And she says to me, what's the matter? I said, 4 sentences. 4 sentences. She cut me off, as she always did, as she always cut everyone off. And she said to me, my dear, you're either in the future or the past. Stop it. She was right. I liked the future and I liked the past because it made me upset. And obviously I liked being in that state. I didn't want to take life on life's terms. And anyhow, we got through the RW thing, and we all behaved decently. We were shocked. No one blamed. I blamed no one. Bob blamed no one. Before I came to AA, and even sometimes in AA, I was very quick to blame, and usually Bob because he was the easiest target. But there was no blame. It was amazing the power that was given to us of a certain way that we could live our lives. We never changed anything. We kept all our plans exactly the same and did as we did. And I'm forever grateful to AA that he was sober for the 12 years in AA for us. We all benefited so much by his sobriety that you people gave to RW, and he brought it to us. Because 12 years before, I would have been wishing for him to leave the planet. He was such a problem. So my life is all AA, but it's the group. It's not me. It's not what I have gotten since I'm here, that I have gotten better, that I have gotten worse, that I have 21 or 22 or 31 years of sobriety. It's not that. It's that I see you people now and I don't have contempt. I don't think you're all strange and unusual. I know people that take a drink and I don't think about that one way or another. Neither Bob, nor myself, nor RW, nor Sean, nor Liz, all these people are sober in AA, have ever told anyone we're in AA. We never found it necessary, and we were told that when we came here, to ever go outside the doors and say, I'm in AA. It's never shown up. No one's ever come to me with a drinking problem. So that's the way it was. So we were anonymous. Bob just died 2 months ago, and it's a very bewildering time for me. I didn't expect it, and neither did anybody else. But that's what he did, and he had to go. And the thing that he had an illustrious career in the kind of work that he did, but the thing that he was most proud of was his years in AA. I don't remember how many years was he sober, 24, 25, what is 78 and 24? 24 years sober in AA. That was his life and joy. And I was his second life and joy. And our AA never mixed. His belief system, his working of steps, wow, I can tell you there's nothing that's written anywhere. I was much, much better at that all the time. When we hung around Boston and he was sober and not sober, they would always have us talk together because he never told anyone he was drinking until it became obvious. He lied. So at any rate, I would tell everyone he lied. He never had to worry about lying because I would find out his lies and tell everyone. So I was kind of like the spokesman. But he always had his own life, his own business stuff and all that. And he had his own friends and his own people in AA. Often we did belong to the same group, but all the other stuff was for him. And he didn't tell me how to run my AA, although I know he would have liked to. He saw a lot of flaws, and I didn't tell him, and neither did we ever say anything to the kids. When we were in San Francisco, we were often at AA meetings together, maybe 4 or 5 of us, and no one knew we were even related for a long time. So as people started to find out we were related, it was quite fun. People would say, oh, that's your son, that's your daughter, you know. So it was quite fun. And we were always so encouraged because the AA family likes to have a real family that can find some peace through AA, and they can find their own lives. I can't say enough for AA. I've met people here that have astounded me. There are people in this whole audience. I see Bill Moore here. And I went to that general service meeting, and I was to stay in general service for 12 years. It was at a time when they needed a person like me who was a sharpshooter. There were very few general service reps from meetings. So I was assigned the job to go to the outlying meetings in the Boston area and see if I could get a GSR. I was told how to do this. I was told to go to the leader of the meeting and to tell them what I wanted. And if they said yes, I was to talk for no longer than 2 minutes. And if they said no, I was to sit down. Most of them said no. I came to AA in San Francisco, and I was grabbed up. I came with credentials. The General Service Office called the General Service people here, and they said, grab her. She's a good worker. So they grabbed me. And Bruce and myself were both in General Service, and we ran all over California getting GSRs. And we had a lot of fun. We got to see the whole place. So it's the only game in town, but it's not a game. It is a very special happening. It is spiritual, as the word likes to be used here, and there is a God here. But don't count on that God on the golf course. The people on the golf course are using a different God. Always remember, the God is here, and it's of our understanding. And the thing that I worked on, always worked on for me, more than anything else in AA, was contempt. They used that word contempt prior to investigation over and over, and I had to learn what it meant. And I knew it applied to many others, but it took me 10 years to know it applied to me. None of it came fast. You could learn to do trigonometry faster than I could ever learn about this program. I thank you all for being here and listening, and I thank you for my life and for the lives of my children and for all the happiness that we had. I came here with much happiness and with much. I did not come here destitute. But I didn't know it because I was filled with that lovely quality called self-pity and anger. Booze. Booze by another name. And I boozed until I couldn't take another drink. I didn't come here for things. I could not have another drink. It was the end. And you people have kept me from having another drink now 31 years. That's pretty good, huh? Clap for each other. Everyone, a hand for each other.